I never thought my life would settle into such an unchanging rhythm. Growing up, I imagined my later years filled with adventure, with a sense of purpose that never faded. But as time passed, I watched people around me fall into predictable patterns: mornings spent at the same coffee shops, conversations circling back to health complaints, the latest bad news, and distant memories. It was as if they had resigned themselves to a slow, inevitable shrinking of their world. I swore that wouldn't be me. For years, I tried to push back against that quiet surrender. I found new hobbies, sought out fresh experiences, and made an effort to keep life interesting. But no matter how much energy I put into keeping things vibrant, there was one part of my life that seemed determined to fade: my marriage. Emma and I had spent decades together, built a home, raised a family, and weathered every storm life threw our way. And yet, somewhere along the road, we lost the spark that made us more than just two people sharing the same space. Most people my age settle into routines, letting life shrink around them. I see it all the time. Men my age spending their days complaining about politics, their latest doctor visits, and who in the neighborhood just passed away. That's not me. I'm not ready to fade into the background. But Emma, she's different now. We've been married for 45 years, and somewhere along the way we lost something. The connection, the fire, the part of us that made us more than just partners in life. It's not that she doesn't love me, I know she does. But every time I try to bring us closer, she pushes me away. She says she just isn't interested anymore. I've tried to reason with her, to remind her that this isn't just about closeness, it's about intimacy, about feeling alive. She shrugs it off, tells me none of her friends still do this, like that's reason enough to stop trying. But I don't want to be like them. I don't want to sit in a rocking chair, staring at the world as it moves on without me. Then there's Hugh. The guy's been sniffing around Emma for a while now, making comments, offering her a taste of something different. I pretend not to notice, but I do. I see the way he watches her, the way he waits for a crack in our foundation. And maybe there's one. Maybe she's been wondering what it would feel like to be wanted in a different way. Today after church, I saw them talking again. I didn't hear what he said, but I saw the way she walked away, brushing him off, yet deep in thought. I didn't ask, I didn't push. Later that afternoon, she sent me to the store for coffee creamer. An excuse. I knew it the second she said it. There was something in her voice, something uneasy. I left anyway. Sometimes it's easier to play along. When I got back, the house was quiet. I walked into the bedroom and saw everything I needed to see. The door half open, Emma sprawled across the bed, evidence of her private attempt to rekindle what she had lost. She had tried, without me. I stood there for a moment, watching her sleep, realizing something important. She hadn't gone to Hugh. She hadn't given up on herself or on us. She just didn't know how to find her way back. When she finally woke up and walked into the living room, her face was full of hesitation. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I just smiled. "Looks like someone kept busy while I was gone," I said, leaving it open. She hesitated. Then something in her softened. "Just trying to light a spark for us," she admitted. Then, for the first time in a long time, she looked at me the way she used to. "Maybe you should come back and help me finish what I started." I grinned. Maybe I should go to the store more often. Hugh had been circling Emma for months, and I had tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing, that she was loyal, that after 45 years together, she would never betray me. But something had changed. I could feel it. Lately, she seemed distant, restless. She barely touched me anymore, barely met my eyes when we talked. I chalked it up to aging, to routine, to the inevitable slowing down of a long marriage. But deep down, I knew better. Then one morning, she dressed differently, too put together for a casual visit with her friend. I noticed the way she carefully chose her outfit, something easier to slip off. I saw the lingerie peeking through, something new, something she hadn't worn for me. When I told her she looked great, she barely reacted. She wasn't dressing for me. She made up some excuse about going to see Lydia, Said she'd be gone for a few hours. I let it go, but something in my gut told me not to. When she came home later, I knew immediately. She moved differently, like she was overly aware of her own body. There was a tension in her, an energy that didn't belong to me. Her eyes darted away when I asked how her day had been. She gave me a rehearsed response, gossip, knitting, the usual. But she looked guilty. And then she said it. I feel a little sick. I'm going to take a shower and rest. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. She wasn't just covering something up. She was washing something off. I told her I was heading out for a while. She barely reacted. Maybe she thought I was oblivious. Maybe she thought I was still the same old fool she had always known. But I wasn't. I called Lydia, asked if Emma was still there. Lydia's answer was quick, simple. Emma hadn't come at all. I hung up, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. It was real. It wasn't in my head. She had done it. She had gone to someone else. I sat in silence for what felt like hours, letting the truth settle. After 45 years, she had decided I wasn't enough. She hadn't even given me a chance to fight for her. I thought about what I should do. Call her out? Demand an explanation? What would that even change? Instead, I got in my car and drove. I had no destination in mind, no real plan. I just needed to be anywhere but home. For the first time in decades, I ended up at a bar. I hadn't been the kind of man who drowned his problems in alcohol, but tonight it seemed like the best option. I drank until the world blurred, until my thoughts quieted, until I could breathe again without feeling like my chest was caving in. When I got home, she was waiting. The second I walked through the door, she smelled it on me. She looked worried. Maybe she thought I had figured it out. Maybe she was trying to read my face to see if I knew. I played it off, said I was watching the game, said the team was making bad plays, giving away too much, making stupid moves. Maybe that was my way of telling her I knew exactly what she had done. Maybe it was just easier than saying, I know you betrayed me. I told her I was exhausted, that I had a headache, that I was going to shower and go to bed. She nodded, but I saw the way she watched me. She wasn't sure how much I knew, and for now, I wasn't going to tell her. Let her wonder. Let her feel the same doubt I had felt for weeks. But one thing was certain. Everything between us had changed. And there was no going back. I left Emma to stew in her own thoughts, unsure whether she had been caught or if I was just acting strange. Let her wonder. Let her feel even a fraction of the uncertainty I had felt over the last few weeks. At church, I watched as she moved through the crowd. Something was different. The way the men looked at her, the lingering glances, the hushed conversations. It didn't take long for me to understand. They all knew. I overheard Steve first, chatting with her like nothing was out of the ordinary, before slipping in a casual offer. If she ever felt like I wasn't enough, he was more than willing to step in. He was married, but apparently his wife had given her blessing, thinking it might reignite something in their own relationship. I clenched my fists but stayed put, watching how Emma reacted. She turned him down, but the fact that he felt bold enough to even ask told me everything I needed to know. Then Lloyd approached her with the same damn offer, worded differently, but just as disgusting. His wife, tired of his constant pestering, had apparently told him to find someone else, and Emma seemed like a convenient option. Again, she refused, but it didn't matter. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. These men saw her as available. Then came Lydia, her closest friend, who confirmed what I already suspected. The entire town knew. Sue, who lived across from Hugh, had seen everything. Emma entering his house, his arm around her as he closed the door. If that wasn't enough, she had caught it all on her doorbell camera. That footage made its way to their knitting group, where they had all stayed late, watching the evidence unfold. That's how it spread. The wives talked, the husbands listened, and by the time Saturday rolled around, Hugh had been grilled on the golf course. He spilled everything. That explained the attention Emma had been getting all morning. The stares, the smirks, the casual suggestions from men who wouldn't have dared before. Hugh had given her a reputation, turning her into some kind of prize for every man in our circle who felt entitled to a taste. When Lydia confronted her, Emma panicked. She thought she had been discreet. She was desperate to make sure I didn't find out. But Lydia wasn't so sure. She told Emma that I had called their house the afternoon she was with Hugh asking for her. That was all the confirmation Emma needed. That's why I had been drinking. She broke down in front of Lydia, not out of guilt for what she had done, but because she realized she had been caught. She tried to justify it, claiming she still loved me, that she just needed to feel wanted again. She admitted that I had never made her feel anything less than beautiful, but for some reason she needed to hear it from someone else. And Hugh had given her that. Lydia didn't hold back. She pointed out the obvious. This wasn't about missing passion with me. It was about the thrill of something new, the rush of doing something forbidden. Emma admitted it. Hugh hadn't done anything I hadn't done before. He wasn't more skilled, more attentive, or more caring. He was just different. And that was enough for her to throw away 45 years of marriage. Then she panicked again. She asked if I would divorce her. She hadn't thought about what it would feel like to be on the other side of betrayal. When Lydia flipped the situation, asking how she would react if she had caught me with another woman, the realization hit her. She had convinced herself that cheating would somehow reignite what we had, that after being with Hugh, she and I would suddenly reconnect. But a week had passed, and we hadn't been together once. She had returned to treating me as a companion, not a lover, and that's all she had ever wanted me to be. Lydia, blunt as ever, told her exactly what I had already started planning. I wouldn't fight for her. I wouldn't argue or scream or demand explanations. I was an engineer. I was methodical. I had already started preparing for what came next. Emma had taken me for granted. She had seen me as her reliable, comfortable presence. Always there, always waiting. She had never considered that one day I might decide to walk away. And now she was starting to realize she might have lost me for good. I sat in silence, my mind a mess of thoughts I couldn't untangle. The weight of what Emma had done pressed down on me, suffocating. 2 days. That's all it took for everyone to know. Whispers in church, sidelong glances, men pulling me aside as if they had some kind of advice to offer, as if I needed their pity. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She hadn't hesitated. And now, here she was, drowning in guilt, crying in Lydia's arms, surrounded by women who, supported her? Encouraged her? Were they trying to justify it? They believed I would leave. Maybe I should. Maybe that was the only sane response. But the thought of walking away from decades of marriage, from a life we built together, felt just as unbearable as staying. She wanted to explain herself. She wanted to tell me why, to convince me it wasn't about replacing me, that it was for us. That was supposed to make it better? The sheer audacity of it made me sick. And then came the insanity. The suggestion that if I couldn't forgive, maybe we could fix this by opening our marriage. Give me permission to do what she did. As if that would erase the betrayal. As if that would somehow bring us closer. She thought I hadn't noticed how people looked at her. The judgment, the rumors. She feared losing her place, being cast out, marked as something she never saw herself as. But what about me? Had she even thought about how this felt for me? The humiliation, the shame of knowing I wasn't enough? The worst part was that I still wanted her. Even after everything, and that realization made me hate myself. She had thrown away everything we had for a fleeting thrill, for something different. And yet, now she sat there, overwhelmed by the idea of me with another woman. That was what broke her. Not the thought of losing me, but the idea of sharing me. Did she think I didn't know what she was feeling? The sickness in her gut, the fear of being replaced, the image of me touching someone else haunting her. It was the same hell she had thrown me into, but the difference was she had made the choice. I hadn't. And now I had to decide, did I still choose her? Or had she already made that choice for me? When Emma walked in, I didn't move. I sat in my chair, staring at nothing, feeling nothing. Or maybe I felt too much. I wasn't sure anymore. My body was heavy, my mind blank. I was shattered. but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing that. Then, she was at my feet, clutching my legs, sobbing. Words tumbled from her lips, apologies, desperate pleas, declarations of love. I barely heard them. I just watched her, detached, as if she were a stranger. She begged me to speak, to scream, to curse her, to tell her I hated her. She wanted a reaction, but I had nothing left to give. I pushed her aside, stood up, and walked away, leaving her on the floor. And then the words came, cold and sharp. Was it worth it? One impulsive decision, one morning with Hugh, was that enough to destroy 45 years of marriage? Had I meant so little to her? Instead of trying to fix things, instead of even pretending to care, she had run straight to the nearest man. Not even someone far away, not even with discretion. She had chosen Hugh. And Hugh, being the loud-mouthed fool he was, had made sure everyone knew. Now, at church, men whispered behind my back, some mocking me, others offering pity. And worse, some had propositioned her, my wife, as if she was suddenly available, as if she was theirs for the taking. She swore she never thought about any of that, never imagined the fallout. Of course, she didn't. She hadn't thought about anything but herself. And now, thanks to her, she was branded as a woman of easy virtue. And I was the pathetic fool who wasn't enough. The weak man who couldn't satisfy his wife, the loser everyone pitied. She gasped, eyes wide. Maybe because she had never heard me speak like this before. Maybe because I never had. Then came the excuses. She swore she had never cheated before, that it had never even crossed her mind. Not until last week, when she had been angry with me, because I had wanted her, because I had tried. And she had felt guilty, she said, for always turning me down. Felt like a failure. Felt broken. Her body was ready, but her mind wouldn't let her. And somehow, I was supposed to believe this was my fault? For wanting my wife? For trying to keep our marriage alive? Was I so repulsive to her? So disgusting that she had to run to Hugh of all people? She rushed to correct me. No, I wasn't disgusting. I was still the man she married, still attractive to her. Then why? Why had she done this? What had Hugh given her that I hadn't? The answer hit me before she could say it. I was predictable, reliable. The same old Theo. Always there, like a book on the shelf she could skim through whenever she felt like remembering the past. But Hugh? Hugh was new, unfamiliar. He was an escape, an adventure, a shiny new car, an unexplored road. I made love to her. Hugh just had love. That was the difference. I exhaled, the weight of realization pressing down on me. I wasn't enough because I wasn't new, and she knew it. She knew I was right. She looked at me, eyes pleading. She needed both. She needed me to love her, and she needed Hugh for the excitement. She didn't say it, but I could see it written all over her face. Then she tried to spin it, tried to tell me she had done it for herself, but also for us. I nearly laughed at the audacity. I stood up, shaking my head. What a load of crap. I had heard enough. She panicked, scrambling for words, grasping at anything that might keep me from walking away. She loved me, she insisted. She had felt ugly, old, undesirable. She couldn't understand how I even wanted her anymore. But now, after this, now suddenly, she wanted me, wanted to prove it, wanted to spend the rest of our lives making love, never turning me down again. Pity, closeness. That's what this was. I told her as much. And I told her I knew the truth. If one morning with Hugh had done this to her, it wouldn't be the last time. She'd crave that feeling again. She wouldn't be able to help herself, and I would never trust her again. She begged me to tell her she was wrong, but she knew she wasn't. I saw the realization settle over her, the fear that she had lost me, the understanding that she had destroyed everything. She tried again, softer this time, saying she understood my pain, my anger, my mistrust, that if the roles were reversed, she'd feel the same way. She swore she didn't know what she had been thinking. But then, she said the one thing that almost made me laugh in disbelief. She told me how much she loved me, how much she would miss me if I left, as if I had been the one who walked away. I had spent years trying to reignite something in our marriage, trying to remind her of what we had, but she had been too busy shutting me out, too busy distracting herself. She hadn't cared, not until now, and now it was too late. I wasn't going to sit around reminiscing about the past, watching reruns of Bonanza, waiting to die. I wanted more. I wanted a future. I wanted to build something new with someone who actually wanted me. Someone who wouldn't throw me aside for a cheap thrill. And I couldn't do that with a woman who might just skip her knitting class to have love with another man. She begged me to reconsider, asked me to take a night to think it over. 45 years, that's what she threw away. And now she wanted me to give her one more chance. I didn't answer. I just walked away. The next morning, Emma placed a plate of waffles in front of me, the syrup drizzling down like some kind of peace offering. She sat across from me, her eyes searching mine, waiting. She asked if I had thought about what we had, what we were throwing away. She promised again to do whatever it took, beg, apologize, anything. I stared at the food, but had no appetite. Her words were just noise now. I told her the truth. None of it changed anything. My mind was made up. She switched tactics. The kids. Wouldn't they be devastated? Wouldn't this tear the family apart? I almost laughed. Half of them were already divorced. The others weren't exactly on solid ground. They'd survive. Besides, they barely talked to me. It was always her they called, her they visited. They would take her side, spin whatever story they wanted. She exhaled, gripping the edge of the table, like she was holding on for dear life. Then she said she had an idea, something she and her friends had talked about. I scoffed. A group of women sitting around trying to fix me? Fantastic. But she kept going. They had all been struggling, just like her. Marriages growing stale, intimacy fading, the same dull routine repeating itself. But instead of running from it, they had come up with a solution. One they thought could work for us too. An arrangement. I leaned back, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish. She explained how they had realized that sometimes desire needed a spark from the outside, a chance to break the monotony. If both partners agreed, they could explore something new, something different, then bring that excitement back to their marriages. It wasn't about betrayal, she said. It was about renewal, a reset. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She was serious. She told me I could be with women in the group whose husbands consented, and she would be with men whose wives agreed. If it worked, they could expand the idea, introduce others, see who else might benefit. I let out a slow breath. This was where we were now. After 45 years, we had reached the point where we were turning our marriage into some kind of community-wide love service. Emma didn't flinch. She insisted this was about more than just us. They thought it was needed. A way to help couples who had lost that part of themselves, who were afraid of losing each other. I shook my head. This felt wrong. It felt desperate. It felt like something that would unravel in ways no one could predict. And if I was being honest, it didn't feel like I was getting the best end of the deal. I told her I needed to think about it. One more day. That night, she slid into bed beside me and pressed against me, her breath warm against my shoulder. She whispered that she felt alive again, that she wanted us again. I turned away. All I could see was her with Hugh. She apologized again, softer this time. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was meant to be a secret, a one-time thing that would reignite something inside her so she could give herself to me fully. It was supposed to make us stronger. I clenched my jaw. That was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. And it was a lie. She hadn't come home that day with some renewed passion. She had walked in like a woman who had just cheated and didn't even have the decency to cover it up. She had reeked of him. She couldn't meet my eyes. She had gone straight to the shower, washing him off while I sat there, already knowing. A whole week had passed, and only now was she suddenly burning with desire for me? She sat in silence, her fingers gripping the sheets. She whispered that she had no idea what she had been thinking, that she had been stupid, that she had never done anything like this before. I didn't respond. I just told her good night. She turned away and cried. As she lay there, something seemed to dawn on her. In all that time, I hadn't kissed her once. The few times she had tried, I had barely responded. I hadn't touched her, hadn't held her, hadn't joked with her the way I used to. I had gone quiet, distant, and it had taken her a full week to notice. She had treated me like an old, comfortable chair, always there, always waiting, taken for granted. How long had it been like that? She thought back to our life together, to everything we had been through, to how much she loved me, how much she had loved our life. And now, after all of it, she had thrown it away for one meaningless morning. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. Emma sat across from me, waiting. Finally, I spoke. I told her I was willing to try. Her eyes widened. "You mean—" I nodded. "When does this start?" She hesitated. "I think now. Of course. Why waste any more time? I'd already lost everything that mattered. What else was there to lose?" Then she mentioned rules. I almost laughed at that. Now, suddenly she wanted boundaries, structure, but I humored her. If we were going down this road, we needed to be clear. First, nothing happened in our house. Our home, our bed, had to stay ours. Whoever wasn't participating at any given moment needed a safe space, a place to detach from whatever was happening. Emma nodded. That made sense. Second, absolute transparency. Every spouse had to agree. No surprises, no hidden affairs. She agreed. The last thing we needed was husbands or wives showing up at our door, furious and blindsided. We had stepped onto a path neither of us could have imagined a week ago, and I had no idea where it would take us. Emma and I sat across from each other, ironing out the details of what could only be described as the most absurd agreement I'd ever been part of. Every instinct in me told me this was a mistake, but logic, or maybe just sheer resignation, kept me at the table. If we were really going through with this, at least we needed rules. First, to avoid misunderstandings, spouses had to handle the arrangements. If Linda wanted me to be with her husband, she had to be the one to call. If a man wanted Emma, his wife had to make the arrangements. That way, no one could claim ignorance or pretend it was something else. Widows, widowers, and divorcees weren't part of the deal. Only couples with mutual agreement. Emma nodded, admitting she hadn't thought of that. Of course, she hadn't. She had jumped into all of this without thinking much at all. Next, I made it clear that discretion was key. This wasn't about building relationships. It was a physical agreement, nothing more. To avoid attachment, each encounter would be a one-time thing unless a spouse approved a repeat. If Emma planned to see someone more than once, I needed to know, and vice versa. She agreed, half joking about my sudden attention to legal-like details. But that's what I did. I was an engineer. I didn't leave things unfinished. I pushed forward. If a man wanted to take her to dinner, dancing, or a hotel, he covered the cost. Likewise, if a woman wanted me, she paid. I had no intention of funding her affairs, and I expected the same in return. She accepted that without argument, though she insisted we should allow for some flexibility. Then came the logistics. Would there be time limits? What if she wanted to meet someone in the morning, then another in the afternoon, and maybe even a third at night? Would there be restrictions on overnight stays, weekends, or even entire vacations? She hesitated before deciding overnight stays would need explicit approval. No disappearing for days, no skipping holidays for this arrangement. At least she had a line somewhere. I asked if this would be limited to our neighborhood and church, or if we were opening it to anyone. She decided it should stay within our community. I wasn't sure if that was better or worse. Then the question of choice came up. Were we obligated to say yes to whoever asked? She quickly shut that down, saying, we should be able to refuse anyone for any reason. But she also reminded me that these were our friends and neighbors, and rejections needed to be handled carefully. Protection was next. She thought the group was safe enough to make it optional. I wasn't so sure. Some of the potential requests already made my stomach turn, and I knew I'd be using protection regardless. To keep things clean, I suggested showering before coming home to remove any lingering scents. She agreed without hesitation. Lastly, I added that either of us could end this arrangement at any time, no explanations needed. She exhaled heavily, saying she hadn't expected this to be so complicated. I told her the truth. Nothing about this was simple. It was a complete mess. To ensure safety, we agreed to keep our phones on at all times in case of emergencies, or just so I always knew where she was. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Then she signed. Before putting the paper down, she hesitated, her voice uncertain. What about us? Would we still act like a couple? Attend church, run errands together, exist as a married pair? I said yes. That part wouldn't change. But then she asked about something I didn't have an answer for. Would we still be together physically? Would we still sleep together? I told her I didn't know. Maybe eventually, when I had seen enough new faces that I stopped seeing Hughes. She choked out an apology, saying she never meant to hurt me, that she still loved me, that what she needed was for me to make love to her again, not just go through the motions. That conversation should have happened long before she destroyed everything. She knew it too. Then, as if trying to lighten the mood, she smirked and asked when we'd officially launch our service. I played along. No time like the present. She could email her knitting group and see what happened. Her face paled. She hadn't expected me to call her bluff. It didn't take long for a response. Linda messaged to say Steve was available at noon. Emma read it aloud, waiting for my reaction. I simply reminded her that this was her idea, not mine. If she was going through with it, now was the time. She hesitated, asked if I wanted her to stop. We had already agreed to the terms. It was too late for second thoughts. I told her to go ahead. I hoped she enjoyed it. Then she turned it back on me. Lydia had requested me for the same time. We had breakfast, then prepared for what came next. As she walked out the door, I saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was fear, maybe regret, or maybe she had just realized that, despite everything, she still didn't want to share me. But it was too late for that. By noon, she was on her way to Steve's house. Linda had already left. She was nervous, but anticipation simmered beneath the surface. She still wanted Hugh, but she'd have to be smarter about it this time. No getting caught. Steve greeted her with an awkward mix of excitement and hesitation. He wasn't sure how to start, whether to kiss her or not. She told him to treat her like a girlfriend, that they were there to make each other happy. They had closeness. Afterward, she wandered into the kitchen for a drink, already regretting it. It was lackluster, disappointing. She couldn't understand how Linda tolerated it. The clock barely hit 12:30, too early to leave. Steve stretched lazily on the bed, grinning as he told her how amazing she was. She faked a smile and played along. When he suggested another round, she went with it, though her enthusiasm was gone. By 2 p.m., she was driving home, already thinking about Theo and Lydia. She knew she'd never go back to Steve. He was forgettable. But that didn't change the reality. Theo was with someone else now, and it hurt more than she expected. She had done this. Meanwhile, I was on my way to Lydia's, leaving a little early, as I always preferred. My phone rang. Linda's name popped up on the screen. I answered. She got straight to the point. She wanted to be with me. I told her that wasn't how it worked. The agreement was clear. Spouses had to make the call. Her voice shook as she explained. Steve had pressured her into this. He was awful in bed, and Emma would likely be home in an hour or so. More than that, he had threatened her when she initially refused. And worse, he had propositioned Emma at church. I already knew. I had seen it happen. For years, I had wanted something, anything, to shake me out of the numbness I'd been feeling. And now, here it was, laid out in front of me. but I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to see where it led. Linda's voice trembled with controlled anger as she told me everything. Steve had refused to call, saying he wouldn't allow her to be with another man because it would make her a woman of easy virtue. The hypocrisy was staggering. He had been cheating on her for years, and she had stayed, first for their children, then because she felt trapped. But now, she was done. Steve had finally pushed her too far. He was in her house, in her bed, with another woman, and she was left to deal with the aftermath. She didn't just want to get even. She needed to believe that not all men were like him. Her divorce papers were already in motion. Nothing about this would ruin a family. She had already lost hers. I exhaled, rubbing my temple. I had plans with Lydia, and I didn't know how long I'd be there. Instead, I suggested we go out the next evening. Dinner, dancing, and if she still wanted, we could figure out how to end the night. It seemed like the kind of slow approach that might give her some control back. She was thrilled, already planning for Steve to get his divorce papers the next day. As a thank you, she promised to bake me cookies. She asked if I could pick her up at 5, early enough that Steve wouldn't be drunk yet. I agreed. Then, before I hung up, I told her the truth. She was an incredible woman, beautiful, strong, and when she was free from Steve, there would be plenty of men interested in her. She didn't need to worry about that. But I did need to go. By the time I got to Lydia's, I was on edge, more nervous than I expected. I admitted as much to her. This wasn't something I had ever imagined myself doing. She laughed, amused by my hesitation. If she were younger, she said, she would have thrown me onto the carpet before I even knew what was happening, and I'd have to take a cab home. But since her husband passed, she hadn't been interested in anyone else. She had loved him too much. She still felt like he was there with her. I realized then that she hadn't invited me for what Emma had suggested. She had invited me to keep me from sitting alone, stewing in my own thoughts, or drowning my sorrows in a bar again. She knew about that. I cringed, embarrassed. Not exactly my proudest moment. I asked how she had found out about this whole mess. Lydia was older than most of us, and somehow she had become the person people confided in. She had heard more secrets than she cared to. People told her things they wouldn't tell anyone else. That was why she had invited me. She wasn't here to judge. She wasn't going to tell Emma anything. She liked Emma as a friend, but even she admitted my wife had been foolish. Then, she asked how I was really holding up. I told her the truth. I was broken, empty, furious, devastated. My life had fallen apart in the blink of an eye. The idea of jumping into this new arrangement felt insane. She understood, and she assumed, being an engineer, that I had already started dividing assets and putting paperwork in place. I didn't want to discuss that. Instead, she asked why I had agreed to this in the first place. I had asked myself the same thing. In the end, I had a few reasons. First, it was too absurd to ignore. I had never heard of anything like it, and I was still shocked at how quickly people had responded. I already had a date for tomorrow. Lydia smirked, immediately guessing that it was Linda. I stared at her. How the hell did you know? She just shrugged. Then her expression darkened. She warned me to be careful. Steve was a heavy drinker, and when he was angry, he could be violent. He had beaten Linda before, badly. If I was picking her up, Steve might lash out. I needed to be ready. Drunk or not, he was a big guy, and he knew how to throw a punch. She told me to be cautious when I dropped Linda off, too. If Steve started hitting her again, I needed to be prepared. I nodded. After talking to Linda, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. Lydia gave me a small smile. She was glad I was seeing Linda. She had a lot to offer, more than people gave her credit for. And as it turned out, she and I had a lot in common. Hiking, furniture restoration, things Emma had lost interest in. Lydia told me to give her a real chance, to see how things went tomorrow. Unlike Emma, Linda would never take me for granted. She would never betray me, and, as a bonus, she was younger than me, which meant we were likely in the same place mentally and physically. Then, she hit me with something I hadn't even realized yet. Maybe the real issue between Emma and me wasn't the physical changes that came with age, Maybe it was that we had aged at different rates, that over time, we had grown apart in ways neither of us had seen coming. Lydia had seen it before. Spouses drifting into different stages of life without realizing it. That was why divorce rates for people over 60 had skyrocketed. Emma had changed a lot in the last year. She had lost interest in so many things. She had stopped engaging, stopped moving forward, started reminiscing about the past more than planning for the future. And when she wanted something new, she didn't try to build it with me. She went to Hugh. That was something I could never accept. I'd spent so much time trying to rekindle what we had, suggesting travel, events, even small things like fairs and markets. But she preferred to sit at home, to live in her memories. I had tried to give her new experiences, but instead of having them with me, she had turned to someone else. That was the line, the one I couldn't cross. Then Lydia pointed out something I had been avoiding. Maybe the real reason I agreed to this entire insane arrangement was that I wanted to catch Emma with Hugh again. I couldn't even deny it. She just smiled knowingly. I stared at her. "Are you reading my damn mind?" She laughed. No, not exactly. But she had seen it all before, and she had seen the way Emma had looked, even after being caught, like a kid in a candy store. She didn't need psychic abilities to figure it out. But Lydia had a gift. People trusted her. They came to her for advice, to vent, to feel safe. And if I ever needed that, she was here. If I didn't know what to do, if I needed a sounding board, if I needed a friend, she was willing to be that. I agreed. I wished I had seen Emma's unraveling sooner, that I had confronted things before it all exploded. But it had hit so suddenly, I had barely had time to react. Lydia gave me a playful look. She liked me. If her late husband's presence wasn't still lingering around, she joked, she might have tested what I had to offer. I just shook my head and laughed, staring at the ceiling. What the hell had my life become? I never expected my life to reach this point. Sitting across from Lydia, sipping tea, and talking about the mess my marriage had become, I felt like a stranger in my own world. Lydia, always blunt, teased her late husband, joking that he was keeping her from enjoying the moment. But before we finished, she made sure to remind me about Linda. I had always thought Linda was a kind woman, but I never knew the depth of her suffering. She had hidden her pain well, likely out of shame or fear, blaming herself the way so many victims do. I agreed to see her, knowing she needed someone in her corner. When I got home around 5, Emma was on the couch, watching TV, as if everything was normal. She asked about my visit with Lydia. I kept it simple. I had a nice time, no love, just a conversation. She smirked, making a crack about some kind of Vulcan mind meld between us, but I let it slide. Then she casually mentioned that Molly had set up a meeting for Carl the next morning. Morning wasn't her favorite time, but she'd make it work. Then she asked about my plans. I told her I had a date with Linda tomorrow night. That got her attention. She pointed out that Steve would never call me, which meant I was breaking my own rule. I admitted it. Linda was on the edge, and Lydia had made it clear that this was important. But I was being upfront about it, not hiding anything. I told her I'd probably be back by 11. Emma absorbed this and then, without hesitation, suggested she see Hugh while I was gone. She even considered taking him out to dinner first, but she didn't want to be too sore before their night together. Then, almost as an afterthought, she admitted he'd probably turn her down. She excused herself to the bathroom, and something about the way she closed the door made me suspicious. We never closed doors in this house unless there was a reason, usually a bad one. I listened. She whispered into her phone, setting up a meeting with Hugh for the exact time I would be gone. I felt a sick kind of clarity. After 45 years, this was where we were. I had been willing to try to find a way to move forward, but Emma wasn't just following the new rules. We had barely started, and she was already breaking them. I didn't say a word. I simply told her I was heading to Linda's and reminded her to keep her phone on in case of emergencies. She played along, telling me to say hello to Linda for her. I knew what she was thinking. She was hoping I'd stay out all night, leaving her free to be with Hugh, and the worst part, I didn't even feel guilty about what I was about to do. By the time she answered the door for Hugh, I was pulling up to Linda's. A police car was just leaving her driveway. My stomach dropped. I rushed inside and found her on the couch, holding an ice pack to her face. Steve had gotten drunk early, furious over some game he had lost money on. When she told him she was leaving, he snapped. The insults came first, then the fists. For years, she had convinced herself that it was her fault, that when things went wrong, she deserved the consequences. But tonight, something clicked. For the first time, she called emergency. The police had taken one look at her and arrested him on the spot. He'd be in jail all weekend, and by the time he got out, he would already have been served with divorce papers. She was leaving in the morning to stay with one of her children, but beyond that, she had no idea what came next. I sat beside her as she talked about her life, how she had always ended up with the wrong men. In college, she got pregnant, so she married the father, believing she was doing the right thing. She had worked, raised 4 kids, kept the house running. Then, the children grew up and moved away, leaving her alone with Steve. He wasn't interested in her, just in drinking, gambling, and blaming her for every bad thing in his life. The loneliness had been unbearable. She had tried to reach out to her kids, but they had their own lives, their own families. She had friends, but no real companionship. No one to share things with, to laugh with, to hold her. She looked at me then, realization dawning in her eyes. That's exactly what you're feeling, isn't it? I nodded. She sighed. I look awful, Theo. You don't have to stay. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to leave. I told her she was wrong. The bruises didn't change who she was. She was a beautiful woman, and no amount of swelling could take that away. If her eyes swelled shut, we'd stop at Walmart and get her an eye patch. She could call herself a pirate. She actually laughed. She tried to protest again, but I told her to put on whatever made her feel good. I'd be here when she was ready. She hesitated. What will people think if they see us? I shrugged. That you got a facelift? She laughed again, shaking her head. For the first time in a long time, she seemed lighter. Before heading to change, she hugged me and kissed my cheek. I cleaned up while she was gone. The house was a mess, the result of Steve's anger. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. Linda wasn't alone anymore. Linda stepped out of the bedroom, her blonde hair framing her face, makeup carefully applied to mask the bruises. The light dress she wore gave her an effortless elegance, making her look younger, freer. But when she saw my reaction, she hesitated, misinterpreting my silence as disapproval. She turned away, ready to change, but I caught her hand before she could retreat. She looked beautiful, and she needed to hear it. Relief softened her expression, and she leaned in, kissing me with gratitude. She whispered how much it meant that I saw her, that I reminded her she was worth something. A joking threat followed, that if we didn't leave now, she might just pull me back into the bedroom, though she never wanted to return there again except to pack her things. As we headed out, she casually asked what kind of food I liked, deciding on burgers and fries as soon as I told her I wasn't picky. The drive led us down a quiet, almost hidden road. Linda glanced around skeptically, commenting on how isolated it seemed, but I assured her it was safe. It was a place I used to frequent until I had reasons not to. Inside, the restaurant felt frozen in time, warm and familiar. Carla, the owner, recognized me instantly, pulling me into a hug before turning to Linda. There was no need for introductions. Carla took one look at her and knew. She embraced Linda too, whispering that she should take care of me, that I was one of the good ones. Linda promised she would. Dinner passed quickly, conversation flowing effortlessly. We laughed, shared stories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. By the time we finished eating, Linda leaned back in her chair, joking that she was glad she hadn't worn anything too tight. Time had slipped away faster than expected. It was already past 8, but the night wasn't over yet. I had promised dancing. Linda's eyes lit up with excitement and nervousness. She admitted she wasn't a great dancer, but she was willing to try. When she reached for her purse, offering to split the bill, I refused. This was my treat, my way of showing appreciation for the evening. A few doors down, we entered a small dance hall, the kind of place that belonged in an old Hollywood film. The band played a slow, familiar melody. Linda took it all in, marveling at the atmosphere. She asked if I wanted a drink, but I declined. Too much food and alcohol would put me straight to sleep. She smiled, admitting she didn't really want one either. All she wanted was to dance. Taking her hand, I led her onto the floor. At first, she was hesitant, unsure of her movements, but I guided her gently, keeping the steps simple. As the music slowed, she pressed closer, whispering how much time she had wasted, how many years had slipped away. I reassured her that the past didn't matter anymore, only the present. With each step, she grew more confident, moving in sync with me. Before long, she was laughing, amazed that she was actually dancing. When a waltz started, I walked her through the steps, calling them out softly until she caught the rhythm. She was glowing, completely in the moment, and when she kissed me, tears touched her cheeks. As the night wound down, she hesitated, not wanting it to end. I told her I had booked a hotel room, not as an expectation, just an option. If she wanted to, we could go there, no pressure. She admitted she did want to. She wanted to be with me. At the hotel, she clung to my hand, nervous but excited. Once inside, she hesitated again, self-conscious about how she looked. She insisted on taking a quick shower, worried she smelled bad after the night. I laughed, telling her she hadn't even broken a sweat. I joked that there was no need for a shower unless I was coming with her. She blushed but admitted her fears. She lacked experience and she wanted this to be good for both of us. I promised to guide her, just as I had on the dance floor. When she returned, she was wrapped in a delicate pajama set, looking unsure. I reassured her, telling her she looked stunning. She barely believed me, but the sincerity in my voice made her smile. After a quick shower, I joined her. When I pulled her into my arms, I noticed she smelled like me now. She started to apologize, but I told her I liked it. That night, we made love. There was no rush, no expectation. Just a quiet intimacy neither of us had felt in years. Afterwards, she held me close, whispering that she never thought it could feel like this. She asked if I would stay the night. I agreed, sending a message to Emma to let her know I wouldn't be back until noon. Meanwhile, Emma, lying beside Hugh, read the message with a smirk. She turned to him, knowing they had all night. Theo wouldn't be back until tomorrow. As the sun rose, I stirred, careful not to wake Linda. But before I could move, she reached for me, pulling me close. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered that this had been the best night of her life. She hated that it had to end. Soon I would leave. I would go back to Emma. But something had changed. She felt different, lighter, whole. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. I never thought it would end like this. After all those years, all the moments we had shared, I had imagined a different kind of ending. One where we grew old together, where we faced whatever life threw at us as a team. But here I was, standing at the threshold of my own bedroom, watching my wife tangled in the sheets with another man. And not just any man, Hugh. Emma's voice, once so familiar, now sounded foreign as she murmured to him, satisfied, telling him how wonderful he was. She hadn't even noticed I was there. I cleared my throat not to be dramatic, but because I needed to say something before I lost whatever composure I had left. The moment she heard me, she stiffened, her head snapping toward me, her face draining of all color. She stammered, scrambling for an excuse, as if there was anything she could say to undo what I had just seen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I simply told Hugh to get out. He hesitated, trying to dress while looking anywhere but at me. Emma, suddenly shifting blame, turned on him, calling him the biggest mistake of her life. He mumbled an apology, more embarrassed than anything else, and fled like the coward he was. Emma, still without clothes beneath the sheets, sobbed, begging for forgiveness, saying she didn't know why she had done it. She promised it would never happen again. She would change, be more affectionate, be whatever I needed her to be. But I felt nothing. Not rage, not sorrow, just exhaustion. For years, I had asked for her attention, for some effort, for anything to remind me that I mattered to her. I had fought to bring life back into our marriage, and she had dismissed it, treating me like an old piece of furniture, comfortable, reliable, but unnoticed. I handed her the envelope I had prepared. Inside were divorce papers and the terms of our separation. She could keep the house, the things in it, everything. I didn't need any of it. I told her I would call the kids, keep it simple, tell them we had grown apart. If she wanted to tell them the truth, that was her choice. She clutched the envelope, sobbing harder, realizing that this wasn't a bluff. I reminded her that I had barely touched her in weeks, hadn't told her I loved her, hadn't done anything to pretend things were normal, and she hadn't even noticed. There had been no attempts to fix things, no small efforts to show she still cared. She had assumed I would always be there, and now, as she begged me not to go, it was too late. I sighed, looking at her one last time. She had been a good wife, a good mother, but somewhere along the way she had stopped living, stopped trying, and I was done fighting for something that no longer existed. I packed a few things, just essentials. Everything else was just stuff. As I walked out the door, I heard her whispering to herself, asking why, crying out that she would never find another man like me. She was right. By the time I reached Linda's house, tears were still burning in my eyes. No matter how much I told myself I had seen this coming, that I had prepared for it, it still hurt, in a way I wasn't sure I could explain. Linda was sitting on the couch, crying too. She had been waiting for me, knowing how this would end. When she saw my face, she pulled me into her arms without hesitation. She whispered that she was sorry, asked if there was anything she could do to help, but I had no answers. All I could think about was the same question looping in my mind. Why? Why had Emma needed Hugh to wake up? Why couldn't she have come alive without destroying everything? Linda wiped her tears and looked me in the eyes. She had spent years asking herself the same thing. Why had she stayed with Steve? Why had she endured his drinking, his offense, his indifference? Fear, habit, uncertainty, it didn't matter. What mattered was that neither of us wanted to waste another second. She took my face in her hands and told me that whatever time we had left, we would make the most of it. There was still so much to do, so much to see, so much life left to live. If I was willing, she wanted to share it all with me. I didn't hesitate. We sat together making the inevitable phone calls. Emma would paint herself as the victim, of course. Linda's kids might not understand why she was finally leaving Steve after all these years. But we had stopped caring about what other people thought. My children, on the other hand, were relieved. They had seen how unhappy I had been for years, and their only response was, "What took you so long?" Linda sat beside me, holding my hand, and asked what I thought about leaving altogether. Her daughter had a home in the mountains of Colorado, far from all of this. It would be peaceful, a fresh start. I thought about it for only a second before agreeing. We didn't need much, just a few bags, whatever fit in the van. Everything else was just things. She grinned, squeezing my hand. We were done looking back. It was time to move forward.